So very good afternoon to all my participant friends. Revered participants, today we are to start to discuss one of the very important, units of theory paper. Under the name of the unit or the title is Education and National Development. Participants, this is one of the very important units which we are to study in Principles of Education and the Theories of Education paper. And by studying the contents of this unit, we will certainly be able to understand the history of education to some extent, under the present concept of education, perception of education. At the same time, the sensing situation we will be able to understand. Friends, this class is a totally introductory class of the whole unit, which we are to discuss step by step, one after another. So let us start the class today. National Education and National Development. And on this unit, this is class number 1. This is slide number 1. And this is the introduction of the whole unit. Participant friends, here is a saying, or here is a quote which we frequently utter at the time of discussing the significance of education. The quote is, "The destiny of India is now being shaped in her classrooms." This is the most important quote of D.S. Kothari. And D.S. Kothari you are to know so much well, because once you are to understand the modern history of Indian education, after independence of the country, certainly you are to understand D.S. Kothari much well, because without understanding the Kothari Commission of 1964 and 1966, we never can come to know about the significance of the first national policy after the independence of the country, that is the national policy of education of 1968. Friends, after the commission, for the practical realization of the recommendations of the commission, the government of India after the independence of the country formulated the first national policy on education in 1968. And in 1985 we got the second policy, and in 1991 we got the revision of the second policy, and again here in 2020 the national policy on education. Again we have come to know about the third or the fourth national policy on education, which is to be implemented very soon from the very first part of January 2022. So friends, the saying of D.S. Kothari has special significance in understanding the history of education of the country after the independence, particularly the second part of modern history. And Kothari said, I like to quote here, the destiny of India means how we can make India a nation with prosperity in all parameters. It is very clearly or very distinctly expressed here in this quote of D.S. Kothari that the destiny of India is now being shaped in her classrooms. Means the significance of education, if we are to understand, or if we are to understand the exercises of the classrooms of different schools and colleges and the universities, this quote has to be well understood by us. And we are to know so much well about D.S. Kothari. This is the full name, Dr. Daulat Singh Kothari. And he was or is a theoretical physicist and Dean of the Faculty of Science of Delhi University. And D.S. Kothari means Daulat Singh Kothari was appointed the first scientific advisor in July 1948 at the age of only 42 years. Let us see the next slide so that we can get, this is the portrait of Dr. D.S. Kothari, means Daulat Singh Kothari. And once we are to understand or by knowing about D.S. Kothari, we can come to know, or we come to know about the national policy, we come to know about the Kothari Commission of 1964 and 66, and for the implementation of the recommendations of the Commission of 1964 and 66. After the independence of the country, the first national policy was formulated by the government of India in 1968. Let us see the next slide. D.S. Kothari or Daulat Singh Kothari was the president of the Indian Science Congress at its Golden Jubilee session in 1963. He was elected president of Indian National Science Academy in 1973. His research on statistical, thermodynamics and his theory of white dwarf stars gave him an international reputation, and that's why he was appointed as the chairman of the Commission of 1964 and 66. And depending on the recommendations of this great academician, the national policy, first national policy of independent India was formulated by the government of India in 1968. Let us see the next slide. Now let us start or begin to discuss specifically these specifications or significance of education and its links with national development. Friends, this is the term economic globalization, which has long been uttered by us and throughout the globe, or by the people of the global nations. So economic globalization and educational globalization, these are two terms which have special importance in understanding the role of education in helping to prosper, or in this process of expansion of knowledge economy. So the economic globalization and educational globalization, these two terms have immensely or greatly been influencing the socio-economic and socio-educational as well as cultural environments of all the democratic nations of the world or of the globe. So friends, for understanding human resource and the role of education in transforming knowledge economy, we must have to understand the concept of economic globalization and educational globalization, because without educational globalization, economic globalization, the perception can't become clear. Let us see the next slide. Today's world, as we have seen or understood, is gradually getting one family in real sense, because of the third phase, impact of the third phase of globalization. All nations, approximately of about 200 or more than that of the world, are from many relationships coming very close with the emergence of the spirit of internationalism, which has also direct link with the concept of globalization, economic globalization. This spirit of internationalism has anyway compelled all nations of the world to germinate very strongly the spirit of socio-economic competition, and that's why the perception of commercialization of education, or the demand of commercialization of education, has also become crystal clear or very transparent. Let us see the next slide. Most of the nations of the world, as we have seen or witnessed, At the present juncture, it has actually crossed the present juncture in a sense, in present situation, are aiming at achieving the target of socio-economic development and the development of scientific and technological knowledge, because the knowledge economy has become very much important for all nations of the globe. Development of military power, which is also another prime, prime point or prime parameter towards which the nations are bound to pay special attention, and war machineries are becoming the prime objectives of all the nations of the world because of the chance situation. Let us see the next. There have been gradual competitions, of very high competitions among some of the political activists, leaders, bureaucrats and social workers in upper social hierarchy to centralize money and power in their own hands in some countries in the recent past. Let us see the next one. And what happens as a result? Conflicting situations, as we have witnessed, have been emerging among some of the nations because of boundary disputes, just like China and India, Pakistan and India. The socio-cultural and political environments of some of the countries, namely Pakistan, you know so much well, Afghanistan, you know so much well, Iraq, you know so much well, Sri Lanka, you know so much well, Nepal, etc. have already been disturbed because of external influence and internal chaotic situations. And in such state, in such situation, COVID-19 has threatened the spirit of international integrity among the nations of the world. Let us see the next slide. And as a result, what happens? You see, friends, mistrust and distrust have been resulting because of the COVID-19. And nations of the world are pointing towards each other because, you see, humanity since today has failed to come to know the origin, source or origin, source of appearance of COVID-19 or place of appearance of COVID-19. And the possibility of new world order has been emerging very rapidly, which has well been witnessed by you, by me, by all of us. Gradually, in some societies, says as for example India, to some extent it is about the recent past, money and powers are centralized in few strong hands. As a result, gaps between the haves and have-nots have been increasing, and conflicts and disturbances in socio-political situations have also become the regular feature of our day-to-day lives, though to some extent a little bit changes we have seen, you see, in the present situation because of the chance political situation of our country. But in some other countries, other very neighboring countries, this situation has been prevailing there, and prevailing in very much, you see, bold way, in very much transparent way, vivid way. Let us see the next slide. Problems of population, which is the most, dangerous problem of the present society of the globe, increase, and because of this, another problem humanity has become bound to face is environmental pollution, have added fuel to the flames of socio-cultural problems, friends. Human existence, in a sense, is at stake because of environmental unexpected environmental pollution, unexpected environmental changes, unimagined environmental changes because of the pressure of the huge number of population or people of the globe. Human existence here, you see, in a sense, is at stake. In such a critical moment of human society, the roles of education are immense, and that's why throughout the global social order, nations have become bound to change the educational parameter on the dimensions of the system of education of own nation, and because of which India as a nation, for achieving the target of becoming the global leader, has become bound to change her national educational policy. But at this critical juncture or moment of human society where there is the devastation of COVID-19, it is not so much easy to evaluate the national system of education of a very populous democracy like India. So friends, the significance of the national system of education or education on national for understanding the specific relationship or the importance of education in the process of national development, we are to understand as a whole, in totality, all the situations, all the sensing parameters, all the challenges we must have to understand. But within a night, by sensing the educational policy, we never can help our nation become a global leader if we do not become mindful towards our own roles in the process of education, towards our own duties as teachers, as educational officers, as stakeholders, as participants, as students. Let us see the next slide. It has also become very difficult to determine the future prospects of such a system of education. For why? For a multicultural, India is a multicultural country, geographically and politically diverse country, multi-religious country, multilingual country like India. So friends, we never can, within a night, help to formulate the national policy on education. For the formulation of the national policy on education, our experts and great educationists and scientists, work day and night on assessing or imagining to help India become a developed nation with the help of the sciences in the sector of education. The National Policy on Education 2020 has come to us, and it is to be implemented very soon in all the states of the country. National system of education has to satisfy the needs and the demands of all the groups of people living together in a society, as in a society with one simple identity, that is as Indian. Though there is differences or diversities, or we have seen multicultural specialities, geographical specialities, politically diverse specialities, multi-religious characters, multilingual characters of various states of our country. Let us see the next slide. Thus, friends, education should be the vital force of social transformation and uplift, as well as the means of encouraging the spirit of international understanding in the devastated COVID-19 social orders. So friends, from today's standpoint, if we are to define education, then here you will find the definition. What should be the definition? What should be the role of education? By studying the present demand, education should be the vital force of social transformation and uplift, as well as the means of encouraging the spirit of international understanding, without which society never can exist in peaceful condition in the devastated COVID-19 social orders. So friends, for understanding the specialities of a nation, for understanding the education from present context, For understanding the role of education in the process of national development, we must have to understand education in totality, and for doing so, we must have to understand the specialities of our national life. At the same time, we must have to have the knowledge of the history of, history, social history or history of societies of various nations of the globe. So this is the introductory class. Here a little bit about D.S. Kothari, Daulat Singh Kothari, and thenceforth the roles of education. Thenceforth the brief concept of economic globalization and educational globalization. Thenceforth about COVID-19, and in the last part, in the last slide number 12, you have got what is or what should be the present definition of education. And here we have mentioned that education should be the vital force of social transformation and uplift, as well as the means of encouraging the spirit of international understanding in the devastated COVID-19 social situation or social order. So friends, thank you so much for today. The other things will be discussed in the later stage, and for all classes, all students of all classes are to be mindful towards this unit, because this unit will help you to understand education as a whole. At the same time, this will help you to understand the history of education of India, at the same time the educational situation of the global social order, and at the same time its role in the process of economic transformation you will come to know. Thank you so much.